Cuba is a threat to the security of the United States and the world. The communist regime in Cuba represents a clear and constant danger to the security of the United States, Latin America, and the world. For decades, the Communist Party of Cuba has supported and protected terrorist organizations, collaborated with oppressive regimes, and destabilized the region with total impunity. Cuba must be considered a global threat, and urgent action against this regime is needed. Collaboration with international terrorism. According to leaked Hillary Clinton emails, the terrorist organization Hezbollah established a base of operations in Cuba to coordinate attacks in Latin America. Cuba has provided key intelligence to countries like Iran and Syria, as well as to terrorist groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah, facilitating their criminal activities. The Castro regime has protected leaders of the Colombian terrorist group ELN, even after they claim responsibility for the 2019 bombing of a police academy in Bogotá that killed 22 people and wounded 87. The Cuban dictatorship harbors and protects dozens of terrorists and American fugitives, refusing to extradite them. As of 2025, Cuba shelters at least 11 U.S. fugitives wanted for serious crimes. In the late 1960s and 1970s, the far-left militant group Weather Underground, which carried out a bombing campaign in the United States, detonating over 24 dynamite bombs between 1970 and 1975 targeting government and corporate buildings, received aid and training support from Cuban intelligence agents operating in the U.S. and Canada. Members of the group traveled to Cuba for ideological and tactical training, returning to the U.S. to execute their violent operations against perceived symbols of imperialism and racism. More recently, in 2025, the radical leftist group Armed Queers of Salt Lake City, founded by trans activist Ermia Fanayan and focused on armed self-defense for LGBTQ+ communities, has come under federal investigation for alleged ties to the Cuban regime through educational exchanges that exploit participants for subversion and propaganda. The group, linked to broader far-left networks, has been scrutinized in connection with the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, highlighting Cuba's ongoing role in fostering domestic extremism in the U.S. Historically, Cuba has trained and supported terrorist groups worldwide, including the Irish Republican Army, IRA, Basque separatist ETA, and Sandinista revolutionaries, providing safe houses, weapons, and tactical expertise to fuel insurgencies against Western democracies. Explicit support for terrorists and criminal regimes. After the elimination of Iranian terrorist Qasem Soleimani by the United States in 2020, the Cuban regime erected a statue in his honor and invited his wife to the island, showing its solidarity with terrorism. Following Hamas's brutal attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, which killed over 1,000 civilians, the Cuban regime not only refused to condemn it, but justified the massacre as a consequence of the violation of Palestinian rights, and organized marches in support of Hamas and Palestine. Cuba's designation as a state sponsor of terrorism was rescinded by President Biden in January 2025, but swiftly reinstated by President Trump later that month due to ongoing support for international terrorism, including harboring fugitives and rebels. This reinstatement, upheld through 2025, underscores Havana's repeated provision of safe harbor to terrorists and failure to cooperate with global counterterrorism efforts. Terrorist origins of the Cuban regime. The 26th of July movement, led by Fidel Castro, was responsible for a terrorist campaign that included detonating hundreds of bombs in cinemas, theaters, stores, parks, gas stations, train stations, and factories. This group, now known as the Communist Party of Cuba, retains its terrorist essence beneath a political facade, hosting foreign intelligence and spy operations. Cuba serves as a strategic hub for adversarial powers, allowing China and Russia to establish and expand spy bases on its territory to conduct surveillance against the United States, just 90 miles from Florida. New reports indicate that these facilities in Cuba are currently being used to monitor the recent massive deployment of U.S. military in the Caribbean. Cuba's espionage operations against the U.S. are among the most sophisticated globally, with a history of infiltrating U.S. government agencies. Notable cases include Ana Montes, a senior Defense Intelligence Agency analyst who spied for Cuba for 16 years starting in 1985, compromising U.S. secrets on Latin America and endangering American lives. In 2023 to 2024, Victor Manuel Rocha, a former U.S. ambassador, was exposed as a decades-long Cuban spy, highlighting Havana's ideological recruitment of high-level officials without financial incentives. The WASP network of Cuban spies, convicted in 2001, infiltrated Cuban-American groups in Miami to sabotage U.S. policy. Loretta Vispa was made up of over 40 officers and agents. 4 escaped to Cuba when the FBI began rounding them up. 10 were captured, and 5 of them pleaded guilty and cooperated with the prosecution. And the remaining 5 became the focus of an international propaganda campaign organized by the Castro regime that did not end until December 2014. Many Cuban spies remain embedded in the U.S. Under Biden's 4 years of open borders, communists exploited the chaos to massively reinforce and expand their infiltration networks like never before. Facilitation of international drug trafficking. Cuba has a documented history of active involvement in drug trafficking, using narco routes to fund revolutionary activities and destabilize the U.S. In the 1980s, Cuban intelligence collaborated with Colombian cartels, including Pablo Escobar and Carlos later, to establish smuggling paths into the U.S. Declassified CIA reports confirm Cuban government complicity in transporting cocaine via the island. Direct attacks on U.S. personnel. Cuba is implicated in the Havana syndrome incidents beginning in 2016, where U.S. diplomats in Havana suffered mysterious brain injuries from directed energy attacks, including pulsed microwave weapons causing symptoms like dizziness, cognitive impairment, and hearing loss. At least 21 American and Canadian personnel were affected initially, with U.S. intelligence assessments pointing to Cuban state actors disrupting bilateral relations and exposing Havana's willingness to target U.S. officials covertly. The Communist Party of Cuba is not merely a sponsor of terrorism. It is, in essence, a terrorist organization that protects criminals, collaborates with oppressive regimes, and destabilizes the global order. Current sanctions and terrorism designations are insufficient. It is time for decisive measures. After 66 years of oppression, terrorism, and drug trafficking, the Castro regime must be overthrown, and its leaders must be held accountable for their crimes.